These numbers are changing from day to day, hour to hour. Latest data as of 10 minutes ago is 250,000 cases with over 10,000 deaths, unfortunately. We all know it started in China, and it really gained light in the media in December. That's when we saw the first disruptions in logistics, basically. And now it seems that Europe is the current epicenter of this pandemic. Basically, we've got closed borders, and most countries are shut down. We're doing home office and practicing social distancing. I'm not sure what's going on in other countries throughout the world, but yeah, everything's pretty much shut down. Museums, shops, anything that's not necessary, like groceries or hospitals. And yeah, it seems that China is starting to get the situation under control, while we are experiencing hopefully the peak of this pandemic. And yeah, so trains, flights, all these connections are being delayed, disrupted, and financial markets have crashed by about 30%. Unfortunately, it is quite evident that we are headed into a recession, and that basically leaves us here sitting in quarantine at home, wondering what to do next, and is this all going to be over soon? Basically, I would like to hand it over now to Sarah, who will give more details and deeper insight into container logistics specifically.
Yes, thank you so much, Alexa. I mean, on daily basis, we are hearing lots of challenges and rising concerns from our clients. And one biggest challenge is that cargo bookings have decreased massively. And even if the clients have secured bookings, they have concerns that if there will be any shipments at all or not, because they are hearing constant rumors that ports will be closed because due to the shutdowns and everything, countries are closing, ports are closing, warehouses, companies, everything. And even the operational process has become really slow. Like there is not much less workforce to work on warehouses, to pack and unpack stuff. So that's why people are facing issues because there are basically no people to work at all anywhere initially. And I think that is, as you already mentioned, it's a part of like safety precautions that people have now to prevent themselves and have to work from home and have to isolate themselves. So literally there is lack of workforce everywhere. So that's also a biggest challenge for many clients. And last but not least, I mean, people are concerned that this situation is so uncertain. We are not sure that until when everything will be completely finished and things will get back to normal, and will it get better or will it get worse? So definitely it's a very concerning situation. So, but this is just a general feedback from our clients, but we at xChange believe in more data. So talking about data, I think my colleague David will tell you more about Container Availability Index. And over to you, David.
Thank you, Sarah, for the very nice introduction. Yes, I am David, leading the tracking and analytics here at xChange. We do love data, and we want to show you some insights we found out from our Container Availability Index. And more important, we would like to hear your comments on what we see. We have been actually featured during the last weeks in different magazines. People seems to be very interested on the CAX. That's the abbreviation for our index. And yeah, to start, the Container Availability Index started as a master thesis we developed here 2 years ago at xChange, and now we make the index public to everybody. And to explain it in very simple words, the Container Availability Index tells you how available a location is. So it's an index that goes from 0 to 1, and a 0 means there are no containers. There is a there is a high demand for containers, but there are no containers. And a number one, or surplus, means there is a lot of containers over there, but there is no demand. A lot of containers tracked through our platform, so that enables us to have a global overview on container supply and demand. Good, a very nice feature we have is that we are forecasting our. Yeah, there are some questions. I will try to reply them after this. We are forecasting the container availability for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And why did we decide to make a container availability index? First, because we want our members and the industry to make better decisions. Just imagine you know that the container availability in Barcelona is very low. Why don't you send some containers over there, and then you can actually sell this container at a very good price? The link you see in this slide leads us to our public website that you can visit. There are 13 locations at the moment, where for 3 different equipment type, you can go there, and actually I will show you this in a while. Now let's have a look at 3 different examples. The first one is Hamburg. In the y-axis, you can see the container availability index. In the x-axis, you see the calendar weeks. We are comparing the year 2019 and the year 2020. And the first thing you notice is that in the 2019, we had a container availability index very low, and the first 4 weeks. This is due to the Christmas season and the Chinese New Year. And what you also see is that in 2020, we didn't have the same behavior. The container availability index was not so low. And if we go to the week 5, where we talk about end of January, beginning of February, we see, or we know that the coronavirus exploded from there, and we can see also the trend in Hamburg, right? There is the curve for 2019 for surplus of containers. Hamburg is normally a location with a lot of boxes, but this year we have a very low availability. 2020, you see that the curve is actually going down. Something I didn't mention before is that CAX below 0.5 means a deficit, and above 0.5 means surplus. So 2020 is showing us a deficit of containers. As I said before, we have a public website. Now I want to show you our website. So just a second. So this is our public website. As I said, everybody can go and visit it. But I want to show you 2 more examples. Here we have Qingdao for 40 TC. And what we can see is 2019 and 2020. Again, China usually has a lot of containers. It's a location where China normally exports a lot of goods, and it's a bit difficult to find containers over there. And what we see this year is that the location has actually a surplus of containers. As I said before, above 0.5 means a surplus. The trend indicates us that there are a lot of containers there. You might ask why this is happening. One of the biggest reasons is the carrier blank sailings. Let me explain you about it. The carriers are keeping their boxes in China. They are not all of them, but a very big part of the containers. And also, they are canceling some of their shipments to North America or North Europe. So with this, they want to avoid the situation that China China's economy goes up again and they don't have enough equipment to to cover the huge demand that we will have in a couple of weeks. To finish, I want to show you another location that is Los Angeles. If we go to Los Angeles, we see also a very big difference between the 2 years. Los Angeles, Chicago, locations in the West Coast are locations that usually have a lot of containers. But this year is really crazy how the availability is very low. So we have values below 0.4. Here you see 0.13, and we expect that the availability will increase a bit, but still will be a deficit, allocation with deficit. Yes. Do we keep the questions till the end, or just give me a second? Yes. Here, Juliana is asking if we are taking SOC and COC. We are actually taking both because one of our main sources is the moves of containers, and we don't really differentiate between SOC and COC. Now I would like to give the word to Christian, who is going to show you one of the effects in the container industry. Christian.
All right, let me also share my screen back up. 1 second.
Yes.
There we go. Thanks a lot, David. I think one more important point to note is that was now, of course, the historical data. We have a premium feature of the CIX that then also looks at a 4 to 6 week forecast to give you a bit of a feeling of where the trend will go. If you have any questions about that, reach out to David for more details. Now we looked at, how do I get to the next page? Now we looked at Corona overall. What's the status quo? What's the situation globally in terms of the spread of the virus? We looked at the overall effects on the logistical supply chain, and we looked at how that shows up in the data and what the data tells us about this. Now the question, of course, is how does this impact your business? How does this impact your logistical operations? And when talking to our clients, we generally hear these 4 kinds of impact groups. Low demand, already mentioned by Sarah. Imports into the US plummeted from China because of the meltdown there, and we expect that to also ripple through the other trade lanes essentially. Then something that we've seen in the data, we see equipment scarcity in areas or locations where traditionally that is not the case, where equipment is generally readily available, and suddenly shippers struggle to find equipment for their business. On the other hand, we see suddenly locations with a huge surplus of equipment, like Qingdao in China, for example, where traditionally there's always been a deficit. So it's really creating an upheaval in basically repositioning lanes and equipment imbalances. Another impact that we currently see and hear a lot about is demurrage and detention charges, because there is not enough workers to staff or unstaff the containers. The carriers are in a position to levy detention or charges and profit from that. They do struggle a lot on other ends, so that's now where they need to make their profit. And last but not least, something that we don't hear so much yet about in the press, but we hear a lot about when we talk to our clients, is that partner reliability decreases or goes down significantly. And with partner reliability, we mean both operationally, so being able to service and serve the requirements, but also financially, of course, creating another element of risk when those businesses go down. I'm sure that there's other impact groups that you might face, so I'm really looking forward to hearing some more about that in the sort of comments and question round at the end, where we just want to have an open discussion of your views as well. Now the question is, what can you do? What are remedies against this situation? How can you deal with this impact? On xChange, now this is probably the only marketing slide in here. On xChange, we see and we have two remedies for the current situation. Number one is, that's the traditional use case of container exchange, finding and using shipper-owned containers, third-party containers, instead of relying on carrier-owned containers. So instead of relying on Maersk Line or CMA to provide you with the equipment that you need, you can use services like xChange, but also, of course, other brokers and platforms to find partners who can lease you or who can provide you with equipment that you can then use for your cargo. That allows you to create more stability on your equipment side, gain flexibility, and oftentimes also save costs, because suddenly equipment provision charges by the carriers go up, especially in locations where there's scarcity of equipment. This also helps you on the demurrage and detention side, because it's not ship and not carrier-owned containers anymore. You don't have to pay detention charges to the carriers, but only a small leasing charge to the owner. Our clients are now using xChange more and more, is finding reliable partners to work with. We talked about partner reliability on the previous slide, both operationally and financially. And on xChange, you have the option or the opportunity to get an overview of a broad spectrum of partners active in container logistics worldwide, assess their reliability, and then initiate transactions with them. All the partners are previously vetted, so there's a lot less risk than just Googling new partners. Again, if you want to learn more, reach out to any of us, visit our website, and we're happy to give you deeper insights into how you can use xChange to basically create mitigation strategies vis-a-vis the current situation. Now, this is already the end of our little presentation. These are our views. These are our thoughts on the current situation, where we are, where things will develop to, and what we can provide you with in terms of remedies and strategies. What we'd love to do now, and Alexa, I'll hand this back over to you to moderate. What we'd love to do now is go through some of the questions that you've posed in the chat already, and then of course open the floor for more comments and a real discussion between all of us, because it's an unprecedented situation. So I think none of us knows the answers to all of the questions, but as a group, I think we'll be smarter at the end of this.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christian. Okay, we did have a question from the chat box from David Cook, and this probably goes to David. How far back does your data go?
Yes, our data is from the beginning of 2018, and yeah, we are having data since that point of time. As I said before, we take into consideration SOC and COC container moves as well, just to answer Juliana. Yeah.
Okay, and then from Mike Norton, we have the question, do you expect factories to shut down new container production at some point in the next year due to oversupply in China?
Maybe for me to jump in quickly. Tough to say from my point of view. I mean, the situation as it looks now is that China claims that it has the situation back under control. You see the workers returning to the factories and churning out new products. So I do expect also the container production to ramp up again. How that will develop, if we really run into a big recession, with the world economic climate seriously deteriorating, I don't know, and it's tough to say. Maybe somebody else in the group has a view on that.
If anybody would like to add their input, you are able to unmute your microphone as well as contribute to the chat box, whatever you feel more comfortable with. So does anyone else have any input on whether they expect factories to shut down or not? No? Okay. Okay, so then we've got some commentary here from Christian Pauli. Containers are one thing, but it will be getting worse with the carriers. Example given, blank sailings, shutdown of services, terminals, etc. We had similar situations of inactive vessels in 2009, the global economic crisis, as well as in 2016 with the Hanjin bankruptcy.
Correct. And I think sort of what this will result in is basically additional upheaval on the container imbalance situation. That's really the point of view that we focus on, or the perspective that we focus on, always in terms of how does this impact your logistical supply chain? How does this impact your value chain in terms of getting the goods from A to B and serving your customers?
Okay. All right. We've got a new question here from Juliana De Ferrari. Where do you obtain the data from in the CAX? David?
Yes, thank you, Juliana, for the nice question. The CAX is based on, so we have different sources. First, as I said before, container moves. So we at the xChange offer tracking of containers, which allows us to get container moves around the world. We are tracing millions of containers per year for full and empties. Apart from that, we have customers around the world, around 300 customers, and that help us to see what is the demand around the world, how many containers are lying in different locations, what is the stock level, and a combination of these provide us with a set of good data to calculate the CAX and also forecast the next 4 to 6 weeks. Yes.
Yeah. So maybe adding to this, there's about 30 to 35 million containers in the world. Each of these have a container ID, and what we do is basically track as many of them as possible through the different data sources, be it carrier track and trace systems, be it third-party systems, be it terminal systems, to get a good indication on where is each container, and aggregating that, of course, to the global view allows us to get that overview. And because usually containers are on the ship for at least 2 to 6 weeks, we also get a relatively good indication of how many containers will arrive in what location at what given point in time, or in what time frame, and how many containers will exit which location in what time frame, which then of course adds up to a forecast which we can display and work with.
Now we've got a question from Irina. How SOC containers should be returned back? For example, I need an empty container in Mundra with delivery to Odessa. After delivery, where should the SOC be left? Just in terminal in Poland?
I think I can answer that question. I mean, if you want to choose Mundra as a port of destination, you are usually always provided the off-hire details, where you would be given probably a depot details where you have to drop your containers off. So it is generally very convenient. I mean, you get every details from the supplier that you have to drop these containers off in these locations. So you just get in advance that where you have to drop this container. And usually it's a depot, not a terminal, most of the times.
Okay. All right, now we have a question from Hamid Mohammed. data which is shared is actually from your 300 plus customers too? Perhaps Christian or David could answer that? Or?
Yes, I don't really get the question, but maybe you are telling us if in the public website we are showing the data, maybe.
So maybe I guess the question is whether we also use the data from our clients to create the CAX, and the answer is of course yes. It's all anonymized, it's all aggregated, so you can't go back by looking at the CAX and infer the equipment moves of one of our clients. That's not possible. But of course, all the data points that we have and that we use are aggregated to create the CAX. I hope that was the question.
Okay. Yeah. If that didn't answer your question, Hamid, you can also add more to the chat as well, and we would be happy to clarify that. Okay. Now we've got from Mike Norton. How much of the shortage is related to shipping lines holding excess equipment due to uncertainty? For example, in Los Angeles, you show a supply shortage, but depots are stuffed and it's increasingly difficult to pick up equipment, even if you have a release. Could there be a pendulum shift to oversupply once uncertainty subsides?
David, do you want to answer that?
Just give me a minute. I don't know if you want to share your thoughts first.
Sure. So I think absolutely there could be a pendulum shift, basically that swinging back over to an oversupply state. The data that's underlying the CAX is really always incoming flows minus or divided by outgoing flows in a very, very basic sense. There's of course a little bit more science to that algorithm, but that's usually the situation. What we don't look at so much is the actual existing inventory in a depot, because we say that in general that is an equipment that is not available, sort of in that sense, because as you say, carriers might be holding on to that. What we can't forecast with that, of course, and that you're right, is once uncertainty reduces, that the safety stock that the carriers or other market participants hold in the depots increases, or in this case reduces, so that they're willing to lease out or utilize a higher level of their equipment. So I believe you're completely right. Maybe you have something to add to that, David.
Nothing really to add. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant to me. I apologize. David.
No, please, Mike.
Yeah, if you've got something to add, Mike, please do so.
No, it just seems very strange. I mean, it's difficult to find a container, but even when you have one, it's difficult to access it because there's so many in the stacks. It really reminds me of I think someone else commented on the Hanjin situation or post-Hanjin situation, where there was this abundance of supply, but you couldn't get to it. And I worry that if there's that shock to the supply and that swing back suddenly, that we could see similar conditions to Hanjin that we're seeing, or that we'll see in the next few months.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in the end, it also remains to be seen how many market participants will not survive this shock to the economic climate, right? I mean, it starts now with air carriers on the passenger side, already basically blanking 85 to 100% of their flights, filing for bankruptcy or bankruptcy protection from the state. So we do expect some impacts also on the ocean side.
Okay. Okay, then we've got a question now from David Cook. Is the CAX an index that xChange has invented? And then a compliment, and very well done if that's the case.
Yes, as I started the presentation, I was telling you that this was actually a part of my master thesis we developed together with our CEO Johannes. And yes, this is our index. Yeah, thanks for the compliments.
Okay, and then C. Sharon has asked, does CAX score tell us about both supply and demand in a location or only its supply?
Yes, the CAX shows you both supply and demand. As I said before, a very high number, close to 1, means supply, and a number close to 0 is deficit.
So it's really all sort of supply and demand data points are aggregated, and as soon as the 0.5 line is a complete balance. So if the CAX is at 0.5, and then there's exactly the same amount of container supply as there's container demand, and as soon as it deviates from that 0.5 line, then you have an oversupply or an over deficit in this case.
Christian, Chaco here. I just want to add a quick comment on that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we build software. We build demand sensing software for a few shipping companies, and the demand side is something that we get from the sales team of a shipping company. But in your case, how do you sense the demand? We know how the supply side is sensed, but in your case, how is the demand really sensed? Thanks.
I mean, I'll let David complete my words, but there's a number of data sources that go into that, especially into the demand side. Of course, there's booking forecasts that we receive from our clients and sort of affiliated data providers. There are bookings that we see, and there are terminal moves that we can take into consideration. So basically, as soon as a container is moved and we get we can track an event, a movement event of a container anywhere in the world, we include that in our CAX. To give you an example, if we find out or if we see that unit TCIU 123450 is loaded onto a vessel in Shanghai and moved into Chicago, that data point or that stretch is added to our CAX database and basically forecasts an incoming container supply into Chicago in, let's say 5 to 6 weeks. And by aggregating all of these data points, we get a pretty clear picture on supply and demand, both supply and demand of equipment globally per location. David, please add to that with your magic.
Yes, that's let's say that's half of the weight we have for the CAX, but the other part is also, as I said, we have more than 300 companies on the platform, and they are either asking for containers or they have containers in certain locations. So we know where there is surplus, where there is a demand for containers, and we also use this to our calculation. Yes.
Got it. Thanks, guys.
Sure.
Okay. I don't see any more questions in the chat. Does anyone else have any input, any questions that they would like to ask or to add?
I think there was a question from Christian Pauli regarding SOC rates.
Did I skip that one? Yes. Okay. Can you give an indication the SOC rates for in Asia, Europe, or Asia, US, WC journey, this to see also where it makes sense related to the falling freight rates in these trade lanes?
Maybe to jump in here, please feel free to add to that, Sarah. I can't give you a US dollar rate right now. We of course have to look into the data, but I guess we can get back to you on that after the webinar. In general, also the SOC freight rates are falling dramatically, especially on those port pairs where, based on the CAX, we also see a significant supply-demand imbalance between port of loading and port of discharge. So in those locations where there's a high equipment deficit in the port of loading and a high equipment surplus in the port of discharge, generally the SOC rates fall way below the COC rates. On the contrary, if the situation is sort of the opposite direction, then SOC rates tend to be on the same level, or even a little bit higher than the COC rates. What happens then oftentimes is that the container owner, so in that case the SOC supplier, also is willing to give you a credit to move the box out of the surplus and into the deficit area, because the equipment is worth more in that deficit area. With regards to specific SOC rates, let us look into the data and get back to you on that. Feel free to drop us an email after this with your email address.
Thank you, Christian. You pretty much answered the whole question.
Okay, and Christian Pauli's comment to that is no worries, thanks, was also looking at the cost of equipment actually. Cheers.
Okay, so Sarah, what kind of pickup credits or pickup charges do we currently see? Maybe ex-China. Is there anything that you can pull out of your sleeve?
Ex-China, it depends. China to US or China to Europe?
Yeah, both.
Both. I would say usually the user, the supplier gets some pickup credit from the user, and to US, I think it's the other way around, I would say.
Do you have an indication on the approximate amount?
It is hard to tell. I mean, we would be happy to give you some kind of, rates if you reach us directly. Then we can, give you an idea. But exact amount would be difficult to tell right now.
Okay. Then we've had, okay, Christian Pauli says, okay, thanks a lot. And then we have another question coming from Hamid Mohammed to everyone. xChange customers hardly supplying 5 to 10% of their inventories. So how exactly data is getting rest of stock? What's the spruce of information as what we're seeing in Asia? There is already shortage of containers.
Again, David, I think this is for you. Of course, we don't only use xChange customer data to create the CAX, but I'll let you elaborate on that.
Yes, you are right. We are using, as you said before, is half and half. We use customer data, but we also use container moves around the world, so that actually allow us to have a really good overview over what is the scenario, right? What is the global supply and demand at the moment? And also, we have really small companies. So the range of companies we have at xChange is from the very big company until the very small company. So this is actually pretty good, and we believe it gives us a really, really good overview. For the first part, I'm not sure, Christian, you want to say something about 5 to 10% that they supply on xChange?
To be honest, I don't know where that figure comes from. That of course depends very much on the specific client. We do have xChange members on the platform who supply all of their equipment because they're not a user. They're container leasing companies or a container trader. So we capture most of the supply and most of the boxes on that end.
All right. Okay, so there are no more questions or comments in the chat box. Does anybody else want to add something, any other unanswered questions you'd like to ask? Again, you're able to unmute your microphones and ask via the audio as well. You don't just have to use the chat box.
Or maybe also some comments or some observations or some challenges that you have faced and how you've solved them maybe. Okay.
Does anyone have anything to add? I hear some faint audio. Is somebody trying to? All right. Well then, if no one has any further questions, again, you can feel free if you've got a question later or yeah, any inquiries that you have, feel free to reach out to any one of us. We'd be more than happy to get you an answer to any question you may have. Feel free to check out our website for more information. And oh, yeah, and thank you all for attending. We really appreciate your attendance and participation, and hopefully we were able to provide you with some valuable insight. So thank you, Mike Norton, and thank you, C. Sharon.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.